Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Recruitment on a Mission, How Nonprofits Can Attract and Retain Today's Talent. We're just going to wait another minute or so to allow everybody to get logged in before we get started, so just hold tight and we'll be back with you in just a minute. Again, welcome to Recruitment on a Mission, How Nonprofits Can Attract and Retain Today's Talent. We are thrilled to have you here to chat about how nonprofits can put their best foot forward when recruiting their talent. Before we dive into the presentation, there are just a few logistical notes that we wanted to make. So we want this to be a really interactive webinar, so please make sure to ask all of your questions to our speakers by typing them into the questions box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be addressing as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, but please don't wait to submit your questions until then. Please submit those questions as the presentation is happening and as they kind of come to you. And the first question, of course, that most people have is, are you recording this webinar? And the answer to that question is yes. We will be making the recording available along with the presentation deck to you via email in the next day or so. So don't worry if you don't catch absolutely everything. You will be able to review the content as much as you like after the webinar has concluded. So now that the logistics are out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Arielle Gart, the Marketing and Outreach Manager at GuideStar. And you may or may not have heard, but GuideStar recently joined forces with Foundation Center to become a new organization called Candid, and you'll hear more about that from us via email and things like that. So I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. And presenting on today's webinar, we're thrilled to have Linda Santinoceto from TriNet and Dina Rulli from Classy.org. Linda is the National Vice President of Nonprofit at TriNet. And in this role, she's responsible for bringing industry-tailored, full-service HR product and services to nonprofit organizations. Prior to joining TriNet, Linda spent 17 years in leadership roles for Junior Achievement of Northern California, including 12 as President and CEO. She holds a bachelor's degree in Communications and Marketing from Texas A&M University. And Dina is the Vice President of People Operations at Classy. Since joining the company in 2015, she has helped scale Classy from 40 to over 200 employees while remaining focused on the core areas around human resources, culture, and employee engagement. Prior to Classy, Dina was the manager of global talent acquisition at Glassdoor, and she graduated from Ohio University with a bachelor's in marketing and art. And so now I am going to turn it over to Linda to get started and to dive into the presentation. Linda, take it away.
Great, thanks, Arielle. Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Linda from TriNet. At TriNet, our HR solution scales with your business by consolidating the strength of thousands. I think we have a little background noise there, Arielle. Got it? Okay, great, guys. So our product at TriNet, our solution scales with your business by consolidating the strength of thousands of small and medium-sized organizations to deliver access to enterprise-level benefits, digital integration, and full-service HR. As she mentioned, prior to me joining TriNet, I did spend about 17 years in the nonprofit leadership space, and so I really know firsthand how many of the challenges all of you face as nonprofit organizations. And I have experiences coming up with creative, budget-conscious solutions to these challenges. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is from that vantage point. And I'm excited that joining me today is Dina Rulli from Classy. So I'm just going to let Dina say hello real quick.
Thanks, Linda. As Arielle mentioned, I'm the VP of People Operations at Classy, and Classy is a social enterprise that creates online fundraising software for nonprofits, which helps to modernize the giving experience to accelerate social impact around the world. And as Arielle also mentioned, I joined when Classy was very, very small, probably about 30 to 40 people, and since we have scaled to over 250. We fluctuate up and down from there, but that's about where we are today.
Great, thanks, Dina. So just a quick note to remind you that this is for presentation is for educational purposes only, and TriNet provides its clients with legal compliant HR guidance and best practices, and TriNet does not provide legal, tax, or accounting services. So with that, before we talk about how to move forward with your recruitment efforts, let's take a quick look at where we're at as an industry. The modern workforce is made up of 5 different generations: baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z, and the silent generation. The most recent projections from the Department of Labor statistics, which cover the period of from 2014 to 2024, suggest that the American workforce will be older than the current workforce, increasingly female, and more racially and ethically diverse. Many are surprised by the projections that by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. What may also surprise you is that it's anticipated that there will be an 85% increase in workers 75 years and older, and a 55% increase in workers between the ages of 64 and 74. With the projected changes to the workforce come costs in both hiring and retaining talent. According to the Society of Human Resource Management benchmarking report, the average cost per new hire is over $4,000. And it can take up to 42 days to fill an open position. So when you think about the lost productivity and time, that $4,000 can increase pretty substantially. This doesn't even take into account the time it takes to ramp up the new employee, which is usually around 90 days to get them to fully functioning. And many experts say a year until they're most effective that they'll likely be. Even absent being in the nonprofit sector, it's a challenging employer landscape. For example, despite the recent federal government shutdown and concerns over a slower, weaker global economy, the government's monthly job report on March 8th highlighted positive indicators. The unemployment rate fell to 3.8%, and the average hourly pay rose from 34% year over year. The nonprofit sector is not immune to the low unemployment. Nonprofits are competing even more, not just against each other, but also with larger and for-profit companies. Here's some statistics from the 2019 Nonprofit Employment Report from Johns Hopkins. Between 2007 and 2016, the number of jobs created by U.S. nonprofits grew by 16.7%. That's nearly 4 times faster than the country's for-profit business. And thanks to this growth, by 2016, the nonprofit workforce outdistanced that of all branches of manufacturing in well over half of American states. Nonprofits also generated the 3rd largest payroll income of any U.S. industry in 2016, behind only manufacturing and professional services. And an interesting fact is that nonprofit successes have attracted for-profit firms into nonprofit fields, leading to worrying declines in nonprofit market share in fields such as diverse social services, nursing homes, and hospital care. The good news is nonprofits, including smaller nonprofits, actually are very competitive when it comes to attracting modern employees, even up against the deeper pockets of larger and richer organizations. We'll spend the rest of our time together talking about how this is and ways you can use this to your advantage. We are seeing a shift in what's attractive to employees. It's no surprise that employees want a workforce that's idealistic, diverse, innovative, caring, a learning ground, and engaging. The good news about this list is these are all attractive attributes where nonprofits' workplaces can really stand out from the competition. Various studies have found that when employees have purpose at work, they're likely to stay longer, are more satisfied with their job, and feel fulfilled. Modern employees want to serve a purpose, and where better can they do this than at a nonprofit organization that's working towards a cause they care about? This is the heart of what we mean when we say that nonprofits can compete by leading with their mission. Your mission is actually a major competitive advantage when it comes to attracting modern employees, and some may even argue it's your best asset. You can lead with your mission in your recruitment efforts by talking about the mission and how the role you're hiring for will free you up. In this way, recruits can have a clear picture of how the work they do will contribute to the bigger picture, something that's very important to them. Lead with your mission in every part of your recruitment effort, your job ad, the interview, the application, everything. We'll get more into what that looks like later. We'll go through these points individually and talk about the opportunities your organizations have to not only give modern employees what they want from an employer, but how to brand that, what you're doing. And I'll ask Dina to weigh in on how her team at Classy was able to use these individual opportunities to great success with their own recruitment and with some of their nonprofit clients. Diversity and inclusion is important to all your workforce and your customers. Last year, we saw the Me Too movement, increases in rules and regulations around board diversity, particularly in California, and customer backlash against companies for failure to be diverse or inclusive. A study from the AARP found that good diversity and inclusion programs can have a positive impact on employee engagement, productivity, and the bottom line. They also found that changing demographics means that attracting and retaining a workforce that mirrors the diversity of the organization's customer or client base is vital to success. As nonprofits, many of you work with a broad range of clientele. This is another way in which you can attract and retain talent. The U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission is responsible for enforcing federal law and make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. There's also the American with Disabilities Act and various other federal laws, as well as many state and local regulations that both include and expand on the federally protected classes, with new protection that seems to be popping up almost daily. In other words, diversity is important to your recruitment efforts, not just because its employees are depending on it, but it's the right thing to do. It's becoming increasingly vital to your compliance and employer-related rules and regulations. There's really two ways to look at diversity in recruitment. The first, recruiting to attract a more diverse employee base. And the second, using your great diversity program in order to attract top talent from whom that's meaningful. The good news is both these recruitment methods work together in conjunction because a diverse employee base tends to attract a diverse employee base. Using your own idealistic, passionate, and diverse employees to attract other idealistic, passionate, and diverse employees can be a great recruitment method because people tend to know people like themselves. Referral programs that come with an incentive should the candidate be hired, and other initiatives are often very helpful in recruitment and can be a time and cost savings for organizations as well. So cast a wide net. Nonprofit organizations often tell me about their struggles to recruit a diverse group of candidates. However, when asked where they're recruiting, many admit they keep going back to the same places. If you're looking to attract diverse workers, you need to look in diverse places. And of course, you want to brand to the outside world that you're not just putting lip service to diversity. So how do you celebrate diversity in your organization? Do you celebrate a variety of religious and cultural holidays? Do you actively look for ways to offer professional development opportunities to diverse groups? Do you take steps to put more women in leadership roles? Do you have open forums and other methods by which employees can actively and comfortably share their thoughts and feedback with management? Don't shy away from telling the world about how you celebrate diversity. Share this stuff on social media, in job ads, and throughout the recruitment process. Several studies have found that one of the best workplace policies to attract candidates is flexibility. A Price Waterhouse survey found that compared to older generations, millennials place more importance on company culture that emphasize work-life balance. And McKinsey's research found that the number one company culture value that women are most attracted to is a flexible schedule. Also, research has found that one of the main reasons why employees quit their job is a long commute. Distance from downtown office locations is often correlated with more diverse neighborhoods. So you can see how offering flexibility, such as work from home options and flexible work hours, not only help you attract more diverse candidates, it helps you prevent expensive employee turnover. Dina, can you share with us Classy's efforts around diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most important thing to mention is that diversity and inclusion is definitely not a one-time event. It's a continual evolution that really needs to be at the forefront. So the strategy that we've implemented and we are sort of executing on here at Classy is very three-pronged. So it's first education and awareness, and this includes everything from we took our entire executive and senior leadership team through a diversity and inclusion workshop, which we will continue to do quarterly because it's certainly one part of it is to lay out the education, but there needs to be constant reinforcement because the organization also changes over time. So we need to make sure that as our organization is changing, we are educating. Another piece of that is we're taking the entire company through unconscious bias training, and that definitely lends very closely with recruitment, the focus of this webinar here today, and then celebrating diversity. So things like Black History Month and Women's History Month, which we're in right now, when those months and those awareness opportunities become available, make sure that they are an immediate thread to your organization and always being thought of. The second piece of our strategy is professional development. And I always like to kind of coin this more as giving access. So we have employee resource groups here at Classy, really designed to give exposure and leadership opportunities to individuals that may not normally have those opportunities. So at all levels. That includes mentorship. We're bringing in a speaker series. At our All Hands that happen monthly, we're bringing in different diversity and inclusion speakers. The one thing I will say, and I'll make sure to note that although we're not a nonprofit, we are still sort of a somewhat grown-up startup, and that generally means very limited budgets. And our head of diversity and inclusion here at Classy, one of the things that I love that one of her mentors said was that you can certainly pay a lot of money for diversity and inclusion, but if you have folks who are truly committed to the process of diversity and inclusion and that they care about it, they're not going to be trying to make money off of something that is just an important piece of workforce culture that is happening. So I would certainly encourage you to not be discouraged by cost, and try and find a network of folks who are really trying to just make diversity and inclusion a more important piece of the workforce, because that will certainly arise. And we've been able to come up with speakers, and we haven't, quite honestly, paid any money for anybody, because these folks are individuals who are just passionate about the cause. So I definitely encourage folks to try and find that network as well. And then the third piece of our strategy is outreach and accountability. And I've listed out some things that we've done here at Classy. So the first item is gender neutral job ads. There's actually tools online that you can use that are also free, where you can put your job descriptions and your job ads through them, and it will tell you whether or not your job ads are leaning towards being more masculine and more feminine and trying to come to gender neutrality. So for example, a common phrase that I see in job descriptions all the time is work hard, play hard, and that is deemed more of a masculine phrase. So getting rid of phrases like that that are very standard but could have folks opt out if they don't feel connected to the tone that you're taking. Secondarily, we've got targeted outreach and niche job boards, which Linda touched on a bit. And you might have to search a bit harder for these, but there are tons of publications in the nonprofit world that have job boards. So try and find those, because again, you can get free postings, use social media, use all those places to increase your candidate pool. Third, a structured recruitment process and system integration. I highly recommend getting an applicant tracking system. There are also very economical tools out there that won't break the bank, but allow you to be a bit more structured in your recruitment processes. So we use a tool called Greenhouse, and they actually have a diversity and inclusion module that we actually just upgraded to, because it will start to remove some of the things that could be immediate biases or unknown biases, like education, names, things like that, so we can bring more just openness to the recruitment process. Next is diverse interview panels. So making sure that it's not the same folks who have the same sort of backgrounds or styles that are interviewing. Make sure that the folks that are interviewing candidates have different leadership styles, different backgrounds, different nationalities, whatever it might be, so that you are getting very, very different viewpoints every time you're looking at candidates for particular roles. Next, diversity reviews need to also happen in hiring and promotions. So we implemented a sort of promotion committee here at Classy, and we do that on a quarterly basis. So we're never going more than 90 days without reviewing folks who are up for promotion. And through that, one of the key pieces is we've got 4 committee members, and one of them is strictly just focused on diversity and inclusion and making sure that we're not promoting more males than females, or more males into leadership, or whatever it might be, and that we're always keeping a very clear, watchful eye on our own unconscious biases. And then last, something else that we've kicked off here at Classy is we're doing quarterly departmental reviews. And that's looking at everything from how many people did you hire, what is their diversity makeup, who did you promote, what was their diversity makeup, and just making sure that we are getting in front of all of our senior leadership team with the stats. So we're giving them all of the data so that they understand all the programs that we're pushing. And we know this, right? Unconscious bias is a term because it is unconscious. So what can we do as an organization to make sure that we are keeping it at the forefront, to make sure that we are not falling into trends that every organization or so easily can sort of trip into? So those are some things that we're doing here at Classy. And as I mentioned, it's not perfect by any means, but we have committed very strongly to diversity and inclusion. And we know that organizations that have good diversity are better performing. So that is something that we are certainly committed to as part of our core values, and also as our performance.
Awesome, Dina. Thanks so much for sharing some great examples with us. And I just want to take a minute to remind everybody on the call that you can type your questions into the chat box, and we'll have some time for question and answer at the end of the webinar. So let's talk a little bit about innovation. So today's employees are educated, and the employee pipeline projections suggest that they're going to continue to be educated. So we know employees want modern conveniences. They want to be proud of where they work and still want to come to a nice place to work and use modern equipment. Professionalism is still really important to these employees, and these employees may understand and accept lower pay in the nonprofit space, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to settle for low budget. There can be a belief in the nonprofit space that nonprofits may be a bit stuck in the dark ages and slow to embrace technology. But a lot of modern technology is so accessible, streamlined, and affordable. There's really no reason for nonprofits not to take advantage of technology in their recruiting efforts. Not only can having a more tech-focused organization help you attract employees, but it can streamline your recruiting, saving time, helping to move the process along, and inevitably cutting recruitment costs. It helps with retention also because it can give you the ability to offer some other perks employees tend to crave, such as continuous performance feedback, the ability to handle your own HR needs, possibly even using their mobile devices to handle these needs, like requesting PTO or updating their address or changing their direct deposit information instantly. We know that technology helps organize, streamline its processes. Dina, can you share a little bit more about some of the creative ways that platforms like Classy can help nonprofits?
Yeah, definitely. So a few things that we are doing and that we try and utilize as much as possible are, one, social media. Certainly do not be scared of social media. You can be using Facebook Live to give, say, realistic job previews of positions that you're recruiting for, of cultures of specific teams. You can be using Instagram stories. If you're nonprofits, maybe you're doing cool volunteering opportunities. Maybe you've got interesting things going on with corporate responsibility. So showcase all of those things. They certainly help to build up your employer brand and give candidates or potential folks who might want to be candidates the opportunity to see what your culture is truly all about. Don't be scared of review sites. I know folks can kind of shy away from sites like Glassdoor or even Indeed, and even kind of a new player on the scene is Comparably. We lean very, very heavily into our review sites. One, because while we do biannual or semi-annually send out an employee pulse survey, in between those pulse surveys, so many things happen. So we rely heavily on our Glassdoor reviews and Indeed and the other sites to give us really true insight into what's happening with our organization. We review each review that comes in with our CEO. We come up with plans, we respond. So do not shy away from those sites. Become an active participant. Otherwise, folks are it's going to be a one-way street, and individuals are going to be giving information on your culture, and you're not going to be able to have the chance to kind of contribute to that as well. Virtual interviewing is also something that's really easy to do that it can expand your candidate pool. So we use Google Hangouts, but you can use tools like Skype, or even FaceTime is something that is free that you can use for candidates. We are based in San Diego, which has a very large population, but we're a software company, and there isn't a ton of software candidates or other software companies here in San Diego. So we rely heavily on moving folks out to San Diego. So anywhere, given various years, we've probably relocated somewhere between 20 to 30% of our staff. And since we don't have big budgets to be flying folks out for interviews, we do it all virtually. And we've had really great success with that. So don't be scared of hiring remote folks without actually shaking their hands first. Niche job boards were mentioned before as well, so I won't go into that any more detail. But the last piece is referral lunches. So this is something that we do here at Classy, and we've had great success with this as well. So there are tools out there that you can buy that will actually scour your employees' networks to bring in qualified applicants for your jobs. We unfortunately didn't have the budget to do something like that. So we kicked off referral lunches, which is every time we have a new hire class, within 30 days of them starting, the recruitment team invites them to lunch, and we take them through just a series of questions and have them sort of scour their LinkedIn networks or whatever tools you might want to use. And we'll walk them through very specific questions. So for example, who was a top performer at your last company? Who was one of the best leaders at one of your former companies? And we walk them through these questions, and we create just spreadsheets of names, and then we upload those into a database. And so every time we have a new job become available, we go there first, and all we do, it costs us maybe like $100 to buy lunch pizza usually for everybody. And we end up having just hundreds of names of candidates that we would never have had access to. So that's just kind of an easy, it doesn't use technology, but kind of an innovative way to expand your candidate pools.
Nice, thanks, Dina. Let's move into a little bit and talk about caring for your employees now. So we all understand the critical need for nonprofit leaders to know that they have a transparent, predictable cost so that they can better manage their budget. It is possible for nonprofits to have access to enterprise-level benefits at affordable prices. A professional employer organization such as TriNet makes it viable options for nonprofits to consider expanding their benefit perks, such as medical, dental, pet insurance, FSA, and 401k offerings. So again, anybody that wants a little bit more information on that, I'll give you my contact information at the end. But for now, it's enough to know that while modern employees will be willing to give up a little in pay for the right organization that fits their idealism and need to contribute, few people are in a position to completely give up employee benefits. In addition to traditional benefits, there's some non-traditional benefits nonprofits can consider that can help them stand out from the competition in ways that are meaningful to their modern employees without breaking the bank. And so I'm going to have Dina just share a little bit about what Classy has implemented.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So the first thing I would say is don't ever just get comfortable with the benefit offerings that you are giving to your employees. So what we saw here at Classy is that a few years ago, we had a culture where we had very few parents. So things like happy hours and team buildings and events that got folks out of the office at either during normal working hours or after hours were really, really popular and a really key part of our culture. But what we've seen as our staff has started to grow up, and we've been growing up with them, is that now we have about 10 or more % of our employees are parents, and new parents at that. So something that we implemented in the last couple years was a transition month for parents when they return to work. So they do a 4-day work week instead of coming back full time, and they can choose which day of the week they want to take off. And that has been huge for the first month. And then we also have unlimited PTO. So we allow them to use that also as part of their transition. And that alone helps employees or new parents rather sort of reemerge back into the workforce and kind of take some of the pressure away, because if you've been a new parent, you understand that transition is very, very difficult. We've started a moms group here at Classy, and just making sure that you've got an environment that is very accepting, that you also maybe have like buddies for new parents returning, because those first few weeks or months are literally earth-shattering to a new parent. So these are all things that, I'll be honest, I was a new parent a couple years ago and I had to go through it. And I was one of the first new parents that happened here at Classy. And so when I came back into the workforce, all the things I kind of struggled with was what we sort of tried to lay out. So we have like a book that we send new moms before they're coming back to the workforce, just to help them kind of reemerge and understand that the feelings that they're going through are natural. So just make sure that you're kind of growing up with your staff if they've been around and have been employees for longstanding, or even if as you start to grow as a company, if you start to bring in more diverse backgrounds, make sure that you are aware of those diversities and creating an environment of benefits that works for everyone. I mentioned, so we have a moms group. That's part of our community efforts here at Classy. Another piece, we have a pride community. We've got a diversity and inclusion community, and that is opening up access to, one, volunteering with nonprofits who have the same passions around the groups that we have formed, but also creating networking and professional development opportunities based off of those communities. We have volunteering time off, which our employees love, and we even try and at least 2 to 3 times a year have company-wide volunteer days where we get everyone out of the office and we organize the volunteering event. It's such a great morale booster, and there's nothing better than actually stepping away from your desk and actually helping the nonprofits that we service every day. Half-day Fridays are big here at Classy. These have been around since the early days, and we've talked a lot about getting rid of them, but they're just a key part of our culture. So the first Friday of every month, we have a half day, and we'll sometimes plan company events on those half days as well, or it's just nice for employees to have a longer weekend if they're trying to get out of town. We have transportation discounts, so we are in downtown San Diego, so we do provide parking passes, but we also give Lyft credits and public transportation credits as well, so that employees can use different forms of transportation to get to Classy's office. We are a pet-friendly office, which is a huge perk, and I think also really helps with a positive work culture when you just have a happy dog that kind of comes bounding up to you every morning. And then a couple other pieces is we do team sports sponsorship, and then we kick off January with a whole wellness initiative month, and every day we have different wellness initiatives that happen, and it's kind of a sort of new year theme that we always do, and then we send a survey afterwards, and we find out which of the programs that we rolled out were most liked by the staff and we would want to continue, and then we keep those wellness initiatives going on throughout the year. But I think the big key piece here, if it's what I started out with, is that what we always do is we reevaluate our benefits annually at the very least, and then even more frequently than that, because things are just changing so rapidly, and we want to make sure that we are in touch with our employees.
Great. So you can see it's possible to get creative with employee benefit offerings without breaking the bank. Let's move into the professional development and talk a little bit about that. There's many ways nonprofit organizations are fantastic breeding grounds for professional development and personal growth. In fact, many of those items, sometimes seen as barriers in the nonprofit community, namely cost prohibited, are great opportunities for modern employees to grow, learn, and develop. One of these reasons is because workers not at nonprofits have opportunities to wear many hats and take on additional roles and gain experience they otherwise might not be able to. This is true especially in smaller organizations, where it's really not unheard of for the development point person, the HR representative, and the marketing manager all to be the same person. Of course, formal professional development is also a great way for nonprofit employees to stand out from their competitors. We already discussed how idealistic employees may be willing to give up something in salary for the right opportunity and professional and development, which leads to more doors opening later on. It's often one of these perks that modern employees value as an employer. This can mean paying for their membership in the professional organization, sending them to conferences and trainings, or even having a formal tuition reimbursement program that can assist them in attaining advanced degrees. We also know that employees tend to prefer ongoing feedback on their performance. This is opposed to one annual sit-down where everything from last year is brought up at once. With little time or opportunity to make meaningful changes or to grow. Instead, they want meaningful, real-time feedback on how they're performing and how their work contributes directly to the organization, both constructive and positive. Mentorship opportunities, of course, are huge in the nonprofit world. One of the great things about your industry is that the idealism and passion for the mission doesn't begin and end only with newly hired employees. A lot of times, more seasoned professionals in the ranks still take pride in developing their teams, and it's not uncommon for lower level employees to get significant amount of one-on-one time and guidance from senior level professionals. Room for growth is a great opportunity for nonprofits to shine with modern employees. I work in the corporate world now, and it sometimes surprises my colleagues when I tell them how common it is in the nonprofit world for employees to stay with their organization for many years or even decades. And I believe a lot of that is due to the opportunity workers have when they find the right organization to really grow in the ranks. I've seen many idealistic workers coming out of college to join a nonprofit as an intern or an entry-level employee who eventually grows into a leadership role or even the ED of the same nonprofit. These are all great aspects of nonprofit organizations that you could and should lead with your recruitment efforts. Dina, can you share what Classy's doing to offer professional development with your folks?
Yeah, definitely. So, Linda, I think one of the key pieces that you just mentioned was kind of that constant feedback. And we have been getting that same message from all of our employees. So, we actually just changed our sort of assessment processes we actually rebranded it to being called check-ins versus assessments, because it should be a continuous conversation between the manager and the employee, and also be more of like a check-in on career goals versus assessing their work, because we should be assessing their work daily, not just once or twice a year. So as a piece of that, there are a number of components that came out of sort of our rebrand and sort of reimagining of what were formerly known as assessments. So the first piece was we created a competency library so that employees could choose where they felt like they had blind spots, and them and their manager could work together to just pick out, honestly, just 2 or 3 things that they wanted to work on for the entire year. Because one thing that can go wrong is you try and boil the ocean and choose a number of areas to try and fix, and then that becomes overwhelming. Or you try and choose different competencies or skills to fix quarterly, and 90 days just isn't really enough time to truly develop a skill. So we created this library, and then along with it, we created a online learning resources. So the key piece here is that folks learn in different ways. So someone might learn best in person. So maybe they want to go to conferences. Somebody might like to learn virtually. And so we are giving online learning licenses. But then what we also did was we crowdsourced from our entire staff books, talks, webinars, white papers, whatever it might be, that would be tools that would help in a particular area. So for example, let's say that emotional intelligence is a item or a competency that someone wants to work on. They now have a resource that is online that they can just go and look at to create kind of this individualized development plan, but also a strategy to increase that skill. So those are a few things that we've done. And then also, certification. So it's very costly to maybe send one person to go out and get a certification, but could you certify, say, an entire department for maybe a little bit more money, but you get 5 folks who are certified? So for example, we just certified our entire product and technology team in Agile Scrum development. And so we had someone come in. It was definitely more costly, but now we have 30 people certified versus just 1 or 2. So those are just some things that you can do to, one, invest in your people, but also make sure that it's very, very individualized, because it can never be one size fits all.
Yeah, nice, Dina. You can see how employee engagement, professional development leads into employee engagement. There's definitely a direct link between employee engagement and organizational performance. Highly engaged employees are vital to creating a quality experience for the people you serve, and thus contribute directly to your organization's success. Engaged employees tend to love what they do and are enthusiastic and inspired by their work. Engaged employees add value, inspiration, and enthusiasm, which is contagious to the organization, to your customers, and to your community. Dina's going to share just a little bit more on Classy's employee engagement.
Yeah, so we really see employee engagement starting at the very beginning, basically with when we find out that we have a job rec to open, because engaging candidates is also just as important as engaging your employees. So the candidate experience, how are you, one, communicating those job ads, like I mentioned earlier, and then how are you also making connections? So for example, something that we do is when someone gets hired on, or even during the interview process, we are trying to make the connection with the hiring manager as early in the process as possible, because we also know that employees choose managers. They choose to stay or they choose to leave based off their manager. And so how can we get them connected to that manager and get them talking about leadership styles, best ways to work together during that interview process, so that they are hopefully choosing Classy, but they're also choosing the job, but they're also choosing that leader. When they join Classy, we also, on their first day, as soon as they arrive for a new hire orientation, they are given a buddy that is sort of their person to show them even things like where to get coffee, the bathrooms, but then also we have the buddy take them out for coffee in that first week as well, so that they have someone just to ask questions to, like, hey, what should I wear on my first day? Things like that that get people nervous, that we don't want to be hindrances or getting folks any more antsy before they're starting. The next piece we do is when a recruiter makes the offer, and that is a part of our process, is the recruiter making the offer. But we then very quickly have the hiring manager follow up with a phone call, letting the candidate know how excited they are and also that they are available for any questions that they might have now that we've kind of gotten to the final stages. And then assuming the candidate accepts, we have the manager lay out a very clear kind of 30, 60, 90-day plan. So it's a realistic job preview of what's to come, what onboarding will look like, what does success look like in that job. So laying that all out to be very transparent, which is what the workforce wants today as well. And then also kind of giving those informational touch points. So I mentioned things like dress code, will lunch be provided the first week, what sort of trainings can I do, or what sort of reading items can I do before coming on board. So just all that information that you could leave at a candidate's fingertips so they don't have to stress about it is all a part of employee engagement during the interview process, but even during that very critical time of onboarding.
Thanks. So when you think about employee engagement, that also leads into creating your employment brand. Many nonprofit organizations struggle with having an employment brand, and that this is an important part of being able to differentiate yourself among other employers to attract top talent. I want to spend the next few minutes giving some pointers on ways you can develop and lead with your employment brand. And I'm sure Dina's going to have a few things to share on this topic as well. We've already said that your employees are your most important ambassador, and that it's very true with your recruitment efforts. If current employees don't care about your brand, external recruits won't either. We already established that your future employees want to work for an organization with a strong culture that allows them to contribute. Make sure they can feel that culture as soon as they start interacting with your organization, and they'll be more likely to really engage with your organization. Your employees should be treated like all other important audiences that you communicate to. Again, your employees are a critical audience. They should never be the last to know anything that's going on outside your organization. Your current and potential employees are already active on social media. In fact, 86% of customers read reviews for local businesses, including 95% of people between the age of 18 and 34. Different social outlets can help you differently. You may want to tailor your approach based on how you're trying to attract talent. For example, with LinkedIn, you can do searches based on experience, industry, or key tags. With other platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, they're easy to share the content of your job postings. And don't forget about Instagram to visually tell your nonprofit story. Remember, integrate passion into your messaging. Show employees visually on social, through other employees, in your brand materials, how your organization can help them fulfill their needs to be part of something bigger in a diverse, innovative work environment. Provide them with employee benefits and career opportunities. Dina, do you have anything you want to weigh in on there before we go to questions?
I think just a couple pieces. I think you nailed everything. The only thing I would iterate is making sure that the brand you're putting out is truly authentic. If you are putting out a idealized brand that isn't actually what your culture is, individuals will certainly see through that. So even engage your employees in creating that employer brand. So for example, have them taking pictures, maybe have a hashtag if you're going to be using Instagram, have them have a hashtag that when they're out volunteering or doing social events or team building, that hashtag is just absolutely populating information for you. So it's even less work for you as the HR recruitment team. So I think that's just it, is just making sure that your message is very, very true and then leaning on other folks to do some of the heavy lifting for you.
Great, thanks. Arielle, do you want to take us into questions?
Absolutely. Thank you both, Linda and Dina, for all of this great insight. We're really excited to be able to open the floor to get all of your burning questions answered. So we may not get to every single question that was submitted during the webinar, but we will do our best to kind of get to as many as possible and follow up where we can over email as well. So we've gotten quite a few questions through the questions box, but please feel free to keep submitting them. The first one is for you, Dina. Matthew wanted to know a little bit more about the gender-neutral bot that reviews ads and things like that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you were talking about there?
Yeah, I think it is called Textio is the bot that we used. I will confirm. I'll make a note and confirm and send that out to Arielle afterwards. But that is a site where you just literally upload your job descriptions. You could upload emails, any kind of communication, and it will highlight words that are either too masculine, too feminine, and kind of even give suggestions as to what you might want to change the verbiage to be. So I believe it's Textio, but I will confirm that and send it to Arielle.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Linda, Dina, I think either one of you might be able to answer this question. Natalia was hoping to get more information about any kind of pre-screening or reference checks in both English and possibly Spanish as well, in terms of, having recruiting applicants and kind of processing those. Do you have any kind of thoughts about places to go or companies to use for pre-screening and reference checks?
I can try and jump in on that one as well. So for pre-screening and reference checks, there are a ton of those. I would say, so for example, when we needed to figure that out here, because we have an applicant tracking system that has an API to a number of different tools, we actually had a list available to us immediately. I know there's tools like Hired Right. I'm actually blanking on the one that we even use, but if you did a quick Google search and you actually just looked at like Hired Right's competitors, you would probably come up with a number of them that do employee verifications, and they're usually pretty cost effective as well. I think another part of the question was pre-assessment, so I'll try and answer that too. So something that I have definitely used here at Classy and at other companies is using kind of like profile assessments to try and look for the ideal soft skill kind of competencies for a role. So we've had most of our success in sales, since that is a more difficult kind of profile to nail down, I would say. So what we did was, a couple tools I've used is Predictive Index, Profiles International, and Preview. It's spelled Prevue. And we use the same process with all of them, in that we would assess our top performers to see what skill sets or what sort of common competence they had. So for example, most of these assessments will come back and have a, say, 10-point scale. And on one side, you're an introvert, and on another side, you are an extrovert. And it will plot folks within the 10-point scale, but then also show where they plot in comparison to your top performers. It isn't something that we use to knock people out of the interview process, but it is something that allows us to then more individualize the interview process to them. And then also even when they're onboarded, sort of their development plan. If we see very quickly that maybe somebody isn't analytical, but they need to have some analytical skills for the job, what can we do to coach them into that skill versus just knocking somebody out that could be a good performer? So we've used those to really, really great success at actually 3 employers that I've worked at.
Those were some great lists of resources, and if you didn't capture everything, don't worry. We will be sending out the recording so you can listen to Dina's recommendations again after we send out the recording, so not to worry. One of the issues that I think some nonprofits could definitely have is losing people to the private sector for, either better benefits or a higher salary or things like that. Are there kind of recommendations that you have, Linda, for nonprofits to kind of retain as many of their staff as possible when people like in Jennifer Orr's organization, they're losing people in this high-cost Bay Area to the private sector?
Yes, I can relate to that. That was probably the biggest, probably actually what happens the most is we lose them. And that's where, again, coming back to really emphasizing working for the mission, where you really have an opportunity to interact with the people that you're serving, it is a huge difference. Continuing to offer the, get creative with your offerings and your perks. Continue to offer extra opportunities for learning for your team. Exposing them to your board members is a great way. Having mentorships with the board. Having them have the ability to potentially go to trainings that are sponsored by your board or your board companies are really important. Really being able to highlight to your team the job shadowing and the cross training you can do in nonprofit organizations, because it's really important for these folks to be able to expand their personal skill set. And where better to do that in some of these smaller organizations where you can really have hands-on experiences and really get to interact with your team. So those are the few of the things that I was able to do to continually remind folks where they're working and why they're working, and try to not compete with just the dollar all the time. And then, of course, a lot of times having a really robust benefit package can retain folks also.
Absolutely. And we are getting a few questions about kind of pertaining to smaller nonprofits. Is there one recommendation you have, Linda, for smaller nonprofits, 20 people, 10 people, one thing that they should leave this webinar today and kind of implement to try to kind of improve employee morale and increase retention there as well?
Yeah, I would say probably the average nonprofit is somewhere in the 10 to 15 space. So it may seem smaller, but it's really a good average size. I think continuing to foster a positive culture, continue to expose folks to their mission, give them access to leadership, to board, community influencers, give them the ability to grow personally makes a big difference. And I keep going back to, don't forget that you, regardless of your size, you do have the ability to offer enterprise level benefits. And I can go into more with folks on that also. If they want to send me an email, I can tell them a little bit more how they have access to that.
Absolutely. And with just about a little over a minute left, we'll just get to one additional question. Dina, this one is for you. It's from Anne about kind of that transition month that Classy offers where, do you pay for 5 days but only require that they work 4, or do they use PTO? And if you pay people for 5 days and they only work 4, how do people who are not parents feel about that benefit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we just transitioned to unlimited PTO in January of this year. So before that, we did have employees, we gave them the option if they wanted to use their banked PTO for that 5th workday, or they could choose to take 80% of their salary for the work week. So we did offer that previously, but now that we're on unlimited PTO, we just have them log PTO for that day. A great question about how did other employees feel about it. We also have created communication. So, for example, we have 3 templates we sent out every time a parent is returning to work. So we send one to the new parent, kind of letting them know, hey, listen, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So be gentle with yourself. And then we send one to the new manager, letting them know, like, especially if they're not a parent, they may not understand what the transition is like, but kind of letting them know sort of what the individual is going through and to be gentle with them and as they're sort of re-emerging back into the workforce. And then we send another one to their team to let them know about kind of this big life change, because certainly, yes, having a child isn't something that everybody is doing, but everyone has either had a loss in their family or had someone who was sick or had sort of a personal situation happen in the same way that we would take care with those types of situations. Is the same kind of care that we want to give to new parents. So we try and just relate it back to something that anyone can experience, whether or not they're a new parent or not. And we've seen really great responses to it because I think our workforce is on the younger side. And so if they're even thinking they might want children or they have friends who are having children or brothers and sisters who are having children, we want to make sure that they're just bringing compassion to the workforce as we would with any situation that someone was having personally. So we've had a really great response to it. I can't say that would be the same in other companies, but that has been our experience with it.
Wonderful. And so we're just about at time right now. So I want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, if we did not get to your questions, we'll do our best to get back to you via email in the next few days or so. You'll also be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow with the recording of the presentation and the slide deck so you can review it at your convenience. And if you did want to reach out to Linda directly, you're welcome to email her at the address that you see on your screen right now, which again will also be included in the PowerPoint deck that we send you and the recording if you don't get a chance to jot it down right this second. But we really do appreciate your time today joining us, and we appreciate you, Linda and Dina, as well for serving as our experts. And please make sure you take a look out for our follow-up email with some great additional resources, and we hope to see you on a webinar again soon. Have a great day.